now working and are looking for a job. Okay. So you are working. You'd like to look for another job. Okay. Do those jobs mean changing fields, or you're looking to improve in the field you're in?
Change.
Change fields. Okay. You?
Hoping to improve in the field I'm in.
In the field you're in. We'll come back and ask what that is. Okay. I think you said also you're working now.
I'm in Krueger right now.
You're in Colo. That's working. Just by the way, one of the things we're going to talk about is no matter what, we'll get to this, but it's just something that happens to be really right at the top of my mind because it happened yesterday. One of the things you always want to project whenever you're speaking to a potential employer is that you are a successful person who's moving from a past success to a future success. No one wants to hire someone who comes across as, things have fallen apart, and it's really bad, and I'm looking for a job. Okay, who wants that? Or, I was in Kollel, and I'm Khalil. I'm not saying that you meant this. Really, I'm not. But what happened, my full-time job now is I work for Kojo Flatbush. You probably have heard of this Youth Corps program where kids get jobs in the summer. There's also a winter program, and that's what I do. Right? Basically, after counseling people on looking for a job for a number of years, I decided to take my own advice, and I got myself a job. So if you're wondering if this guy can know, does his advice work? Yeah, it worked for me. So just last night, we were doing an intake, because the summer program is coming, and week by week kids register. Maybe some of you were in it back in the day. And there's a 3-hour orientation that we have to give. It's a city requirement. It's part of the program. And of course, no one likes that idea. Everyone wants, and so therefore everyone has something incredibly important to do. You have to get me out of here. My husband has yard site, and has to dive, last night we also had, it's a mixed group. There was, a woman comes up and says, I have to go preach in my church. We have them all. We have everybody, right? And a guy comes up to me, a young, yeshiva-looking guy, and he says, I have to get to college. And I said, if you look around this room, there's quite a number of people who, all looking like, who have to get to college or yeshiva. He said, no, I have to get to real college. I don't like that. And I said, I think you really should consider what you just said. Every single person who is in a yeshiva is in a legitimate institution of higher learning and pursuing education that is extremely important. And it is very real. And to imagine that it is anything less important, I don't think it's a Yiddish Zach to talk that way, but it's really a slap in your own face. If it isn't important, why are you doing it? So, I'm Khalil. I'm not saying that anybody here had that attitude, but it hit me. So it really bothered me. I have 3 master's degrees, by the way. So, I know what college is right. It's about. But this was not. It's not good. Employers, just as a general point, that's really important. Employers want to hire successful, enthusiastic, forward-looking people, and many researchers have found that in speaking to employers who hire, that really is the number one thing they're looking for. In other words, even though you're a bookkeeper, and even though you're a broker, and even though you're a this, so of course they want an excellent bookkeeper. But what they really want to find out are you motivated? Are you enthusiastic? And that isn't compartmentalized. It's not going to be that I'm a really enthusiastic bookkeeper, but I'm a schlepper about the rest of my life. Right? So you really need to think about and always make an effort to come across as someone who's coming from success to success, really mechayil chayil. And we'll talk about how to describe that success and why it's so and how you can make it real to the person. Just like I said, it was stuck in my craw because they just had this yesterday, and I hope that what I said, made a difference. So here we go. Okay. So we were meeting people and talking about what they're doing now. So we had a couple of career changers, okay, and some people looking for their first jobs, And I think you said you are working?
Yeah.
Yes, you're working?
I'm working career change.
You're looking to do a career change and? Career change and?
I was working, looking for another job.
Looking for another job. So you're kind of in between. Okay, so that's very important because that also, oh, you lost your job, when that's why the wheels start turning. What's wrong with this guy? Why did you lose your job, right? So how do you confront that, right? How to make sure that it comes across as you're looking for your next opportunity. And, right in the back, career change. Okay, good. So first off, if nothing else, if you take away nothing else, if you're looking to change careers, so when you leave this room tonight, go home. If you use the internet, go home and go to Amazon. If you don't use the internet, tomorrow morning, go to a bookstore and buy a copy of What Color is Your Parachute? Okay, write that down. That's called the Job Changer's Bible. What color is your parachute? It has been the bestseller. It really created the whole field of job search, and it has been a bestseller for 40 years, more than 40 years. Actually, the original author, who amazingly rewrote it every single year to reflect changing conditions in the job market. I'm very impressed by that. He passed away, not Nifter, he passed away, just a couple of years ago after doing it for over 40 years. And now his children have continued it. But it really is an extremely valuable piece of work. So really do yourself a favor, make sure you get the most recent edition, they change it every year, and get a copy of What Color is Your Parachute. That is good advice. Regardless of what I say, parachute is good. Okay, so do that. And you can walk into any bookstore and just tell them, I need parachute. They know exactly what you mean, because everybody needs parachute. Just as an aside, it's very interesting. I thought it was interesting. He was originally a priest. And apparently the church isn't doing so well these days. So they had way too many priests. This goes back many, many years. And they had to figure out a way to fire them. It was kind of embarrassing. So they decided they would counsel them on how to find new jobs. And this guy just kind of took it on, and because somebody had to do it, and it turns out he was really good at it, and some of the priests started bringing their friends and their neighbors and their relatives, and he said, wait, maybe this is my new job. And sure enough, it became a bestseller, and he really made a great impact in the world. So it's just a good story. Okay, so I just heard a quote from Warren Buffett. I'm sure that's a familiar name, very wealthy man, enormously successful investor. Not only he's made himself I think he's now number 3 on the list of the richest people in America. Only a fortune of about $70+ billion. What can you do with that anymore? And he's an interesting guy, and he really has a seichel yasher in many things. And what I just heard recently was that he said, if you find a successful person, you will find that one of the things they focus on the most is on making sure they're only doing a few things. And if you find a really successful person, you will find that they work very hard on doing one thing very well. In other words, focus is extremely important. And no one is capable of putting their full attention and focus and creativity and enthusiasm on a bunch of stuff. That doesn't work. And therefore, number one rule of a job search is it has to be taken as something that you're really going to give yourself to and spend time on. If you're not spending time on your job search and really, really giving your mind and your thoughts and your focus to it, it's not going to work, because it doesn't happen automatically. It happens when you really push yourself forward to articulate exactly what you're looking for, make a target list of the companies where you want to work, where you feel you can make a contribution, get to all these things. And therefore, it has to be something that you really give standing to as something I'm going to focus on, okay? If you run into someone who says, well, I'm kind of looking for something, they're not. They're not. because that's something, unless they have a very wealthy father-in-law and they're really just waiting for him to drop something into his pocket. It doesn't happen that way. It does not happen that way. So that's number one. What does this focus consist of? So step one of this focus is, who are you and what is it that you want to offer to your next employer? So even if, for example, you're a bookkeeper, you're an accountant, you're a physicist, whatever it is. But every single company has positions with that name on them, but they're not the same. Okay? They're not the same. Each one will have its own little feature, its own little aspect, aside from the fact that it may be motivating to you, for example. Let's say that someone is very, very concerned about the environment. And he's a bookkeeper. Being a bookkeeper for Greenpeace might be very meaningful to that person, and he might go to that job with tremendous enthusiasm. Whereas being a bookkeeper for Trump Properties just really isn't his thing. No commentary meant by that. If that's the case, then yes, it is quite correct that he should be looking for positions as a bookkeeper with environmental organizations, right? He will do a better job. He'll be able to communicate enthusiasm and an interest in the wholeness of the company and come across as a far better candidate. And that is extremely valuable, right? I remember an interview I saw quite a number of years ago. They were talking to someone, I believe, who was in the waste disposal industry. And they were asking him about, like garbage isn't very... And he said, no, you don't understand. Everybody who works for me loves garbage. Right? Yeah. They really see it as whether it's a calling to leave a clean environment, maybe, or that it's a service to the people, or that, that they're reclaiming materials, whatever it is, there's something about the work that's exciting to them. Okay? And that's why they do it well. The employer you want to work for wants to see that in you. Okay? So it's really, really important to think about, what is it that I would get excited about, right? And even more so, once you start narrowing in on that, expand your interest and find out even more about it, right? Basically, be interesting, especially when you're talking about the field that you want to spend, commonly referred to as 80,000 hours, right? The rest of your career on, right? I had a fellow who came to me just recently. This is not a good story. He really was kind of rudderless for a number of reasons, and I wasn't able to help him very much. A friend had gotten him an interview, and he called me after the interview and said, the guy wants me to have a resume. Can you help me write a resume? I said, okay, I'll try. He comes in. I said, well, what was the name of the company? I don't know. What was the name of the person you spoke to? I don't know. What do they do? I don't know. How surprising is it that a day later he called me back and said, the guy said he doesn't really want me. He had zero interest in the company. I can assure you, the person who has built this company, who is running it and feeding his family on it, he cares about it. He wants the people who are there to care about it. And if you can't, that person, once you wouldn't do that. But if that person can't even be bothered to notice the name on the door as he leaves, let alone what they do, he doesn't care. And that came across. So, to the extent that you're able, think about where in the world of work you would be really excited if that was where you got to work. Maybe you love sports, right? Yes, there are people who are into sports. And for them, being able to go to work for the Nets is very different. Whatever it is, right? What do they call it? Merkaz Linyanei Chinuch, or whatever. If that's your thing, yeah. There's a big industry out there. There's a big empire out there of day schools, happens to be my eldest daughter, works for a Chabad day school, right? If that's your thing, they need accountants, they need teachers, they need curriculum developers, they need cooks, right? Whatever it is. If that's exciting to you, yes, then focus your job search on that. If the nature of work is such, number one, you do it better if you're enthusiastic about it, if you're inspired by it, and number two, or three, whatever, that there's going to be bad days. There's going to be days when the kids are on your case and the sewer backs up, and you go to work anyway. If you're not enthusiastic about your work, you're going to walk in dragging, right? And nobody wants to do business with you. So doing something that really matters to you, as my work now with kids and getting them employment, I find it wonderful. I really get excited over it. And I urge you to do something, think about that, and really try to define the kind of place that would get your juices running. That's number one. Okay. Is there any problem with that? Hopefully any questions about that? All right. We'll stop for a moment. Yeah.
What if what interests you doesn't make you money?
For example, give me an example. Let's take an example so we can all be on the same page.
For example, teaching, you're not getting more than $60,000 for doing.
Okay, so there's a couple of points about that. Number one, there are teaching positions that do a little bit better. Very often, if you go a little further out of town, right? That's one way that they end up paying a little better. And there are, if you insist. I met someone once. He said he wanted to be in chinuch. I said, well, what kind of chinuch? He says, well, I want to be a 10th grade Maggid Shir in Flatbush. Yeah, I told him I didn't see that as a very, attainable goal, right? But if you're flexible, there are some options. But I also think that it's really worth thinking about one important point, and that is, it's much easier to be happy with less money than to have money and less happy. If teaching really is what animates you, first of all, I was in chinuch for many years, taught in day schools, and certainly didn't make much money, but our home was happy because it was what I was committed to, and my wife was committed to it. She came from a chinuch family. She's a nurse, right? But that's the home she wanted. I have two of my kids are teachers, right? So even if it ends up being that you'll make less money, but if teaching really is what just inspires you and it's a dream, I really urge you not to let money turn you away from it, because ultimately, listen, Hollywood, there's plenty of money, and there's a gazillion psychiatrists and psychologists, and everybody's on tranquilizers, right? The money didn't help. We all know that, right? But you can find plenty of places where they don't have a lot of money, and yet their kids want to be like their parents. They want to have this is the life that they admire. They understand that there's commitment here, there's inspiration here, there's meaning here. That's worth huge amounts of money, right? Especially in our day, when I don't have to tell you how many parents are tearing their hair out over their kids who aren't doing this and aren't doing that, and it's all and it's horrible. Ki ein bayis asher shel meis. But the families that are doing something that really counts, where they wake up in the morning and they're excited about what they do, right? Their kids generally have a better time with it, and it's not the money they miss. So, I really feel that's something that's very, very important. And I'm so glad you mentioned it, because obviously, I'm here in Crown Heights. Crown Heights is an idealistic community. That's why you're here, right? You didn't join up, the whole nature of it is that way. That idealism is extremely valuable, right? And so, if that's the case, not to mention, okay, let's mention that. If you're really into something, so let's say you turn out to be a fantastic teacher, so then you can also pick up a side thing as a consultant. You can create curriculum materials that somebody else may pay you for, right? You can, I have a neighbor across the street from me in Far Rockaway who retired early, and he sells his curriculum materials. He was an outstanding classroom Rebbe. His name's Yehuda Winder. It's called Baloshon, something like that. He has a series of Lashon HaKodesh workbooks, and that's how he makes his living now. He sells his workbooks. Sounds good, right? So, there are options. There are options. Aside from the fact that most often when you're in a community, especially if you're out of town, I also experienced this, and they're aware that they're not paying you very much, but there's other things they'll do for you because they know that you're there, that you're making a sacrifice to help their community grow. And so it ends up being more doable than you think. Many years ago, I was a Rebbe in Miami Beach for 5 years. Miami Beach is an expensive place to live, right? All of a sudden there was, an anonymous $2,000 Hanukkah gift shows up in my mailbox, right? And this was like 25 years ago. $2,000 is still not bad, but even then it was even more. People do things for their malamdim. They know that they're important to the community. So okay, you get my message. Again. So yeah.
During my old course, all these lectures about finding things that you're already passionate about.
Yes.
How much would you say is about passionate about already, or how much would you say if you went and walked into any job and put a few years in, you get passionate about?
Yes, that's a very good point. Yes, it's a very, very important that, and I think it's actually used in the way we think, right? I'd be a little from here, right? I can use some Jewish. I can be a little Jewish, right? Anybody have a problem with that? I have to be careful during the day. I'm not rabbi, and everything has to be very English. Das creates connection, right? I mean, we understand that, right? So if you become very, very knowledgeable of something, yes, you do become more connected to it. And it's very, very valuable to leave yourself open to that, right? Especially because of the way our chinuch system works, we don't have a lot of exposure to things that, in fact, had you been exposed, you might have gotten interested, but there were other important things you were doing in the meantime. It wasn't if you were sitting around doing nothing, right? But you may, in fact, become fascinated. That's where personality becomes so much more important. If you're the kind of person who allows himself to become fascinated, then yes, as you become more understanding and know more about it, yeah, you can get into it, right? And that in itself creates that attachment, right? So that's absolutely true. Whether it's insurance or whether it's furniture or whether it's food distribution, right? As you become, I have a nephew who works for the Social Security, so they have lots of words for these things. Yeah, there's something called an SME, subject matter expert, right? Subject matter experts, you can't imagine the stuff he gets excited about, right? Tables that present how many discrimination cases were settled with the whole thing, because that's what he works in, right? Believe me, it doesn't draw me, but he's into it. Right? And he's so there actually in his division there is a title that they give you. You're an SME, right? And that title, he is so proud of it, right? When he was in yeshiva, I guarantee you that wasn't the stuff that lit his fire. But he got into it, right? And as a matter of fact, he's been promoted because of it. He's making more money, and that creates a connection. So you're absolutely right.
The question is how much do you have to be into your career before you start?
Okay. Certainly, my nephew's example would say that you don't have to be into it at all. Because believe me, he didn't know anything about this stuff ahead of time, right? But he's the kind of person who was always curious about lots of stuff, right? He's a reader, and he loves to talk. He goes to a shiur about there's a series of shiurim in Baltimore. He lives in Baltimore. There's a series of shiurim about the connections between American history and Jewish history and halacha, right? It's for people who think a little bit different, that's not your typical thing. But he's always been into that kind of stuff, right? So if you allow yourself to be a curious, interested person, then yes, right? I tried to turn you off. From Baltimore, but I don't know who it is. I'm sorry. Okay. Fine. Now it's really off. I tried to talk before. I'm an old man. I can't figure out these things. Curious, interested people get curious and interested, right? You spot them. It's not my thing. You know what? 10 years from now, it also won't be their thing, right? But people who are open to being interested, yeah, it will be. Right? And those people are much happier and easier to get along with anyway. Have you ever watched a TED Talk? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Ha-ha. So you're an interesting person, right? TED Talks are my litmus test for people who are interested, because they talk all kinds of sugar Sachen, right? And it's fascinating. You could waste the rest of your life listening to TED Talks, right? Right? But it'd be so interesting, right? I'm sorry?
It's only 10 minutes.
Right, after all, 10 minutes, right? Right, after all, right? You certainly aren't going to waste my time. Right, exactly. Right. That's a great way to start, to help yourself whet your interest in becoming interested in stuff, right? Oh, maybe I should find a book about that. Maybe I should find someone who knows more about that. Who knows how many people have found professions that way, right? Because there's lots of stuff happening in the world that people work at that we don't even know about. We know there's a doctor and there's a lawyer and there's an accountant, because that's who we are, That's, Jews are middle class, But there's lots of other stuff. Especially, I've thought, of course, there's many miles in being in Eretz Yisrael, but in Eretz Yisrael, there's also a lot more professions, a lot more jobs. If you would decide, I would love to be a farmer. Not too many farmers around here, right? Eretz Yisrael, you can be a farmer, right? Right?
It's easier to be here, no? Okay.
I'm sorry?
It'd be easier to be from a farmer in the United States.
Except that just the economic issues here are very difficult. Right, whereas there, the society is geared towards helping people set up small farms. Just this past winter, my wife and I were zocheh to spend 2 weeks in Eretz Yisrael, and we spent the Shabbos with a cousin in Beit Cholkia, which is near Ashdod. And it's great because you're walking down the street. It looks like a regular little subdivision, a suburb. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And all of a sudden you hear, in the middle, it's like if a block over on Kingston Avenue there was a dairy farm. That's the way it is. They're into it. And many other things like that. But allowing yourself to be interested and get interested in, that's going to help you tremendously when you meet the person who you want to hire you, because he's going to see you as, hey, you're on my wavelength. And that is absolutely the key to getting hired. Far more important than your degree, far more important than whether you're an expert in this particular kind of pivot table is, are you an interesting person that's nice to have around? Can I talk to you? Will you share my enthusiasm? Will you share my Mesiras Nefesh? I stay up till midnight getting this company running. Will you be there with me? If you come across as yes, then he's going to want you around, right? That's what people want to hire, is someone who's on their wavelength, someone who's with the project. And the more that you get that across as, yes, I'm with you, I'll be with you, I'll grow with you, I'll do what it takes to develop in the way you need me to make this company a success, that's where the job's going to be. Okay, so it's really, really important, and to communicate that, right? To give it over with all of the importance and the gravity that I really mean this, right? That it deserves. So that's really important. So I want to go on to another thing, but I'm sure you've all gotten what I want to get across there. Okay, second thing. We've mentioned at the beginning that job hunting can be very discouraging. You have to take that seriously, which means you have to have a plan. And what are you going to do when you get down, right? I assume if you're looking for a job, especially if you don't have one now at all, you probably don't have a lot of money to spend. So it's not as if you can go say like, oh, I'll go to, what's it called? Both and Bourbon, right? Both and Bourbon, Bison and Bourbon, right. When I told my kids, that I was coming here tonight, so one of them, her husband's in real estate, and he kind of hard is doing well, right? So she texted me, there's Bison and Bourbon. So I looked it up. Good grief! What does she think is going on here? I didn't go there. I'm sure it's wonderful. Just a little above my price range. But even if it's just that, you know what? I'm going to set up with my wife that at least once a week we're going to go out for Cokes and take a walk together. Right? That's a fantastic investment. And it gives so much chizuk to the process. And talk about it. And be open about that. This is hard, but I'm sticking with it. I'm really giving it my effort, and I'm looking for opportunities, and I'm going to stay on it until I succeed. But be honest with the fact that sometimes you have to take a step back and, let's say, take a walk and go get a Coke, right? Go to the base manager and say to him, whatever it is, that gives you a little bit of break from it, because it is going to be. it gets discouraging. That's the way it is. On the other hand, there's a wonderful little book, and I strongly recommend it, especially anyone who's interested in business, and especially if you're interested in sales. There's a little book called Go for No. Go for No. And Go for No is basically presenting the concept that no is just a step on the way to getting to yes. And therefore, you should never see it as a failure. You should never see it as a rejection. It's just the process you go through, and you have to go through on the way to getting to yes. So so like most people set their weekly or daily goals as I'm going to accomplish a certain amount. He said the right way to do it is I'm going to move through a certain amount of no's, right? If I'm trying to make sales, I'm going to make sure I make 20 calls. I'm going to get 20 no's, because by the time you get 20 no's, you probably get a yes too, right? But even if I don't, I accomplish something, and tomorrow I'll do it again, right? And even if I get 10 yeses today, tomorrow I'm going to sit down and shoot for 20 no's, right? Not walk away after I've had 5 sales today and say, hey, I'm good for the week. I made my quota. I'm feeling good. Let's go for a golf game. No, just the opposite. Okay, I got 5 yeses. Now, what about my goal of 20 no's? Right? No is just another part of the process. Right? So go for no is a really, really important thing. Everyone here is married, right? Because when you're introduced to go for no is also very valuable. Right? Okay, so that's valuable. Now, the key to a successful job hunt is that you don't hunt for a job with a shotgun, you use a sniper rifle. No NRA advertisement kids here, okay? Right? Right. But I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, which is a military place, so these kinds of things are familiar. So for you city dwellers, let me explain. Right? Shotguns shoot a cartridge that's got about 40 or 50 little pellets in it. And you use them in hunting, very often in duck hunting, right, where you're not going to be able to get a single shot of that duck way up in the sky. So you shoot this thing, and it shoots like a cloud of little pellets. And the hope is that at least 1 or 2 of them will hit a duck, right? That doesn't work in job hunting. A sniper, on the other hand, for those of you who are not military buffs, probably takes not more than 1 shot a day. He might sit there all day long, waiting and waiting and waiting and planning and planning and practicing until he finally has that single opportunity that he knows is exactly what he wants, and bingo. Okay? That's job hunting. If somebody says, I sent out 100 resumes, he's not going to be finding a job. Because there's no way 100 companies can all be exactly what you're looking for. There's no way you can be enthusiastic about what 100 companies are going to be doing, right? There's no way that you could follow up and really understand what 100 companies are doing, right? Rather, understand yourself, understand the skills that you really want to bring to the job place, that you really feel will make you a special opportunity for the employer. And then you say, where is the company that uses these skills? Where is the combination of environment and for that matter, even location, right? You don't want a 2-hour, 3-hour commute, right, just to get to a job that, okay, some people do that, but I don't recommend it. Or maybe it doesn't bother you. But whatever it is, but you're looking for a company, you're looking for a work environment that fits you. And that's the place you want to work, and now your job is to figure out how to get them to know that you're the employee that they want to hire. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you can only do 1 at a time, but you can't do very many, and you really need to be focusing on them. So what do I mean by focus? Number 1, be able to define clearly, this is absolutely vital, clearly, why are you the person they should hire? I'm a bookkeeper. So are the 35 other people at the door who want this job? What's special about you? Right? What's special about you? Well, I know I've handled these many accounts with this kind of software and solve these problems. Remember that every business only hires people for 3 reasons. Exactly 3 reasons. There's no more reasons. It's only 3. Make money, save time. Every single person who gets paid for doing one of those things. Do you make me money, or save me time? There isn't anything else that happens inside the walls of any enterprise. Okay? Everybody is doing that in one way or one shape or form. So be able to talk in that road, right? I can increase your revenues because I can handle this amount of work 20% faster because I'm very good with this particular kind of software. That's fantastic. Okay? Now you're talking my language, right? I can reach this many more customers because I know how to create a network and I know how to get use social media to get people talking about the product, and therefore this many more customers will find out about your product. Aha! This is a language I understand. Okay, right? What are you going to be able to do, especially if you can put it in those 3 terms: make money, save time, that makes you a special value? And now, the company that I feel that needs this, that I would like to work for, like we said before, even because I'm very into environmentalism or whatever else it is, or because it's a very successful company, I like their product, because it's nearby, it's a good commute, my friend works there. How many get them to notice me? How many get them to know that I'm the person they want? Then it's time to talk about networking. Okay, so I would stop here for a moment. Anything that we want to talk about understanding your value. Let me take a step back. I just thought of something. So some of you are job changers and some of you are first-time lookers. So if you are going for the first time, you're looking for your first job, that doesn't mean you don't have experience. Experience doesn't mean that you got paid. Experience is anything you've done in your life that made the world a better place in some way, right? Meaning, let's say you went to a summer camp and you were a waiter. Maybe you were even in charge of waiters, right? Not really much of a job to talk about when you're looking for a job as a programmer. Oh, yes, it is. You were working with people. You organized things. You accomplished projects. You were relied upon to make sure that the kitchen was open at 5:30 every morning, right? Whatever it was, right? Whether it was in yeshiva, whether it was at home, whether it was in the Beis Medrash, whether it was in the summer camp, all of these places, if you were doing something, that's experience. It's your job to think about what you were doing and pull out of it what were the skills, what were the accomplishments that I have that I can now use to explain to that employer, right? Make me valuable to him. So everyone has experience. The question is, can you articulate how that experience is connected to that job? And that is something you all can work on. We're going to actually start talk. That's really a key part of tomorrow night's discussion, talking about how to make sure our resume gets across the points that make us a valuable addition to the company. At least that's what I think I want to talk about. So, but that's something you start chewing on. Again, anything you've done, you don't have to have been paid for it. In any setting, it doesn't have to be at work, is experience. Okay? And pulling out of that experience, that life, are the points that demonstrate your skills, your talents, your abilities that are going to make you valuable to an employer. Okay? That's if it's your first job. If you're changing jobs, if you're changing fields, it works the same way. In other words, let's say you in the past you were a bookkeeper, and now you want to be a teacher. So you say, what's one got to do with the other? Everything. But you have to switch around the Rubik's Cube, right? Twist it around some. So over here it looked this way. Now you're going to, now it looks this way. It's the same thing, just looking from a different angle, right? Which means you're going to think about what are the key skills for this job I want to go to, and how can I show that I really had those in the past, in some way, shape, or form, and restate them, reconstruct them, so that my new employer will see it and be able to understand it, right? For example, let's say that I was a bookkeeper, but I taught someone how to use the new system, right? I implemented some new policy, right? I interviewed people and brought them into the company. Those are education skills. Okay, so let's describe them so that the principal will understand what I'm talking about, right? Right. So the key in career changing, is to be able to look at first off, to set your goal, where you want to go, what are the key skills there, and then look to your past and pull out the things that you can now construct to show that you really are, right? You really are the person they want. No employer wants to feel that they're not hiring the best possible person. So therefore, if you come and say, well, I want to change careers, right? I've never done this before, so what do I want you for, right? So don't say that. There's no reason why you should. Rather say, I've been using the exact skills that you want, but I was using them in a different way. And now I'm ready to put them together in the way that you need them to be successful in the job you want done. Okay? That's how a career change happens. Personal example. So I told you I was in chinuch for many years. And I had become an administrator, not like a principal, I was like a paper pusher. And as I got into my upper 40s, I realized that this was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It was not. So okay, what are you going to do now? I'm sorry? It was not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I had a side thing, which I still have, Baruch Hashem, that I had founded and I run a tzedakah in the neighborhood where I live in Far Rockaway. And I realized that even though it sometimes was extremely inconvenient, especially around the Yom Tovim, when believe me, I have a wife and kids, there's plenty to do around the house. Somehow I had limitless energy and I got everything I needed to do around the house, but while spending hours and hours taking care of all the obligations that I had because I was running this fund. I said, well, if that's the case, maybe that, basically like social work kind of thing, maybe that's where you belong. Didn't have time to go back and get a degree. But I did manage to meet someone. Rabbi Werdy, you listening? It was Mort Edelson. Did I tell you that? Right? You know who that is, right? Who actually gave me a chance. And why did he give me a chance? He looked at my experience with my tzedakah fund. He said, you've been a social worker. All the things I need you to do, you've been doing, right? And so he hired me. I didn't know anything about this kind of stuff then. It was actually when I was doing that work for Met Council on Jewish Poverty, that's who I worked for, that's where I realized that so many people really don't know and aren't getting the guidance they should have about job search, and that's when I started investigating this, and that's how I got into what I'm doing now. But it was someone who gave me a chance. But that is key. That here in something I was doing, it wasn't paid, right? It wasn't a job, and yet it was experience. It was experience. I have the impression, for example, that here in the neighborhood, many of you are involved in various volunteer activities. Miftaim of various kinds, all this happens, right? Think about what you were doing. You were organizing, you were advertising, you were connecting, you were going out, you were way beyond your comfort zone, right? Nobody grows up thinking like, oh, how easy it would be to put on tefillin on somebody on Fifth Avenue, right? That's an incredible step outside your comfort zone and connecting to people in a way that's very, very important. That's experience, right? You have to make it clear to the employer that it's experience. He's not going to see that, but you can say it. You can make it clear. So you're going to put that together, create a sense of what it is that you really can deliver. Think about the company where it's really valuable. And now you have to figure out a way to get them to notice you. Well, how do you do that? I have something I call the Aunt Tilly rule. Who's Aunt Tilly? Aunt Tilly is 94 years old, and she lives in a nursing home, and she plays mahjong with her friends all day, right? You probably all have an Aunt Tilly kind of person in your life, right? So now you're looking for a job. Are you going to tell Aunt Tilly? Why? I mean, after all, what does Aunt Tilly know about being an accountant? What you don't know is Aunt Tilly's mahjong partner has a nephew who owns the company you want to work for, right? But you'll never know that if you don't tell her. Because in fact, that's what these old folks do all day long. They talk about my nephew and my niece and my grandson and this one and that one. And you go and say, Aunt Tilly, I really would like to be be an accountant for, Cats and Cone Incorporated. And she said, no problem. My friend's grandson is Cats. You'll never know. So tell people. Talk to people. But now it's really important to talk about what are you going to say to them. Never, put this in capital letters, gentlemen, never, ever, ever ask someone to get you a job. Ever. Because think about how that comes across. It makes you a schnorrer. Does anybody particularly like schnorrers? Have you particularly looked forward to the day that one would come and talk to you? No, you don't. Right? Because you're just asking, do something for me. That's not what you are, and it's not what anybody wants to hire. So don't do it. So, well, if I'm not asking them to help me get a job, what am I going to say? You're looking for information. You want to learn. Okay, how does that? First off, in that little book that Rabbi Wardy put together, is an excellent article about what's called informational interviews. Read it carefully and do it, which means the following. Let's say there's a certain person, and he might have a connection to the field. He has a connection to the field you want to go into. You're not going to say, hey, I'd like to help your help in getting a job. Bad. Don't do that. Rather, I'd like to talk to you about your work. Why? Because I'm working on a job search, and I'd like to make the strongest possible presentation to my future employer. I'd really appreciate being able to ask you some questions. How does that sound? How does that sound? Very powerful. You're a guy who's going places. You're making plans. You're building. Everyone loves a young guy who's going places. Right? A young guy who's building himself up and using his own resources to create a future. Everybody loves that, especially gray hairs like me, right? Youth is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and everyone loves it if it's being used. Don't be a sponge. Can you give me this? Can you do for me? Can you get me a job? No, don't say that. But can I ask you some questions because I want to learn? Because I want to build, because I want to do this right, of course I'll talk to you. All right? Will every single person say yes? I can't promise you that, but an awful lot of them will. Okay? Now, so let's say you want to find out more about a certain field. Of course, you'd really like it if Mr. So-and-so would actually hire you. Believe me, he knows that too. But the way you approach him makes all the difference. You're coming from a position of strength. You're asking for information. You want to take advantage of his unique experience. Everyone's favorite subject is themselves. Everybody loves to talk about themselves. So you're going to give him a chance to do that by asking him questions about his experience. Okay? Now, especially if you're changing careers, and especially if you're growing in the job. Hold that. I just want to finish this one thought before I forget, okay? Especially if you're in a field and you want to grow, and you're going to ask questions to Mr. Katz, right? Test out your questions ahead of time. Meaning, think about what you're going to ask. Never ask a question that you can answer by going to Google, because then it's an insult. What are you asking me for? Go do your homework. Rather, just the opposite. Show him that you've done your homework and now you need to call on his unique experience. For example, let me give you an example, okay? Let's say that you are in a certain field where there are two approaches to getting a certain job done. You've done some reading and you found this one or that one, right? So you go up to Mr. Katz and you say, what do you think is the best way to get this done? Why don't you Google it? You'll find people who talk about this. You don't need me for that. So don't say that. What are you going to say? You're going to say, Mr. Katz, I know that for getting this particular task accomplished, there's approach A and approach B. In your experience, which one has proven more effective? It's the exact same question, except now he understands why you have to talk to him, right? You've done your homework. I know there's approach B A. I know there's approach B. In your experience, which is the most effective? Now you need to talk to him. That gives, number one, you were showing your respect for his time. You did your homework. You're not asking him to give you what you could have done on your own, right? But at the same time, you've made it clear that there is a certain input that you can only get from him, and that's why we need to talk. He'll talk to you about that. Okay? That should always be your goal. You want to ask questions that show, I'm serious, I've done my homework, right? But I do have information specifically that I'd appreciate if you could help me with, because you're the one who has this experience. So that is really the key to it. Okay, you had a question.
Yes. What's a little more about what you said previously regarding that idea that you said you shouldn't ask the person, oh, could you get me a job, or could you... Now, that's you, if I, to my understanding, you're speaking about specifically someone who is able to hire you. The question is, let's say you're thinking about moving to a new place, or going to a new place, and you know someone that lives there, you're like, hey, did you see anything available that someone's looking for a job? Is that right, or is that also...
I always like it better if you put it in terms of learning and growing. In other words, can you help me get information on the nursing home field in your town? Right? Even though he knows perfectly well that you want him to introduce him to the guy down who sits in front of him in Shoal who owns the nursing home. He knows that, right? But how is he going to introduce you? My friend who needs a job, or my friend who wants to learn about the nursing home environment in this community?
Correct.
Right?
But I'm talking about the person you're speaking to can't really help you at all get any job. They're
Right.
just working like some low job or anything, but they're around the community and they know
Right.
people looking
Yes,
for things.
but if you put it in terms of information, A, they are more comfortable in speaking to other people on your behalf, because if it's in terms of can you help me get a job, he's very hesitant to go over to that guy because he may not need that guy for a favor himself sometime, right? So he doesn't want to use up his points right now for you, right? Whereas if he's coming over and say, hey, my friend's looking for information, can he ask you a few questions? It doesn't use up his points. Right? So that makes him more willing to talk to people. And it gives him a safety zone in that should, let's say, for example, the guy meets you and you turn out to be a dud, right? He's not going to go back to him and say, why'd you send me this guy? You wanted me to hire this guy? He was nothing, right? That's embarrassing. And that really puts him in a bad position. He's very afraid of that, right? Whereas if it was only an informational issue in the first place, it doesn't reflect badly on him, so he's free for that. Okay? So you've protected your friend and made him more free to act on your behalf. So that's why I feel that it's always a better way to do it that way. Okay? The guy who's looking for information and for understanding, of especially taking advantage of the unique knowledge of that person, is always an easier guy to talk for. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, you answered my question, but I want to bring up an important point. There's a difference between information and ask. So you could ask someone, don't ask them to get them a job.
Right.
But ask them, what's the process to get this job? And if you could
leave off the job word. Okay. I'd like to learn more about how this particular field is doing in this community. I'd like to learn about the market for a certain service in this community. Right? I'd like to learn, are there, is the need for sushi well served in this neighborhood? Right? I can't imagine it's not, but
If someone's working should you send them, let's say, your resume that they can pass it on to get
You never want a resume to go where you haven't sent it, okay? Because a resume has to be targeted to the person who you want to read it. What is he interested in? If the resume is just out there, then everyone's going to go for the lowest common denominator. What can I do with this guy?
There's the other side where a company would take a referral from a employer ready than someone new who's just applying.
Yes, but you want to know what that company is and learn about their interests before you write that resume that you give to your contact to put in front of the person so that it makes maximum input. That's a perfect example where you've got one shot, right? And you want to make sure that that connection gets you as much bang for the buck as you possibly can get. And that will only happen if you've tailored your approach, your cover letter, your resume, to make sure it speaks to that person, which you can't do ahead of time. You got to first do your homework. You got to first find out about the company. For example, that your friend will say, well, I can get your resume in front of such and such a person. Great. What's he looking for? What's important to him? What's his pain point? Right? Are you familiar with that point? With that term, a pain point? You know, what's the big problem that's really not getting solved? Right? And then you tailor your resume to show, I'm your guy. Right? Right? I can do the things you need done. Then you give it to him, and he puts it down on the desk, and the guy goes, it's the guy I'm looking for. Where did you find him? Right? You only get one chance for that. So you don't want a generic resume to go in front of that person. You want to know where it's going and get a chance to investigate all those points we just mentioned to make sure the resume hits hard. Because you only get one chance.
I have another point. You could tailor it. You could target the person who you wanted to get to.
Yes.
But might get to another hiring man. Like it might not the person will
Yes.
post the position.
Absolutely possible. And there's nothing you can do about that. But on the other hand, if it at least speaks to the specifics of the company, they sense, number one, that you're trying to make yourself valuable to them. You're trying to be on their team, so to speak. All right? That you took the time to do your homework, that you are, at the very least, if they decide to bring you in, there's that much less onboarding that has to be done because you're already moving in that direction. And that always is valuable, right? Because it's that much less they have to do. And that much sooner you'll be producing. Right? So you always want to give that feeling that I'm moving towards you, I am for you, I'm going to contribute, I'm going to hit the ground running. Right? The most you can get, the more you can get that message across, that's what you want to make sure your resume says, your cover letter says, your elevator pitch says, consistently throughout. Right? That I have something I can do for you. Right? And so then, and whoever sees it, again, it might have been really wonderful if this guy would have read it, but if he doesn't do that and it gets put in that guy's hand, it's still going to be better than,
sending it to back home.
Right, exactly. Okay? Other question? Okay. So, 2 questions that you never, ever, ever want to ask. Right? And when people will talk to you, they probably will end up answering them anyway, so don't listen. Don't listen. Number 1, do you think this is a good job for me? How does he know? Right? Maybe you want to go to the and ask that question, but not to anybody else. Right? He doesn't know. Rather, you want to take all the information that you have gathered, everything you've learned from talking to people and asking good questions, and then you go home and take a walk, right? And go get a Coke, right? And you decide if it's a good job for you, right? You're the only one who can really tell that. You're the only one who knows what's lying inside you that you're really itching to be able to use to succeed, right? What you'll bring out. So never ask, do you think it's a good job for me? Number 2, never ask, do you think this is a good field to go into? Is it growing, right? Do you think there'll be a lot of jobs, right? No, don't ask that question because for reasons unknown to me, I've looked a little bit, I can't say I've recently, I didn't find any research on why it's true, but it is true. People always have a dim view of other people coming into their own field. It's very crowded, right? What does that mean? Well, for example, let's say that there's 1,000 people in this part of Brooklyn who do this work. If there's 1,000 people who do this kind of work, there must be a tremendous demand for it. There's probably enough for 1,001. Not to mention that if there's 1,000 people doing it, tomorrow one of them will die, move away, change fields, get promoted, right? So there'll be room, right? If it's crowded, it's because a lot of people want the work done, and there are jobs, right? There'll be a lot of competition. Yes. You ever see any people who said, no, I don't want to play in the NBA. It's too much competition. Right? That's where the good players go. Right? So if there's competition, go for it. Right? So people tend to be pessimistic, and they tend to misunderstand that very point, that occupations for which there's tremendous demand, there are a lot of people in that field, but that means there could be room for one more. On the other hand, this other person can never know. Let's say that you want to go into something that's really, really esoteric, right? Medieval stained glass windows. I happen to have seen an article about such a person, right? That's your thing. You really love medieval stained glass windows. And if you would say, is this a good field to go into? Any normal human being would say, you are out of your mind. No one's going to make a living on medieval stained glass windows. I happen to know, because I read exactly the point of the article was, that there was this woman in England, right? And she fell in love with medieval stained glass windows. And I'm sure her parents were ready to brain her. She happens to have a wonderful job now. She's the government expert on restoring church windows all over the country. She's the only one who knows anything about it, right? There's a lot of people doing that kind of stuff. If it really clicks for you, and that's what works, don't ask that person if you have the inspiration and the drive and the charisma to end up making it into a field for yourself. He doesn't know you. So don't ask him. You have to make that decision. So whether it's because there's lots of people or because there's nobody doing it, one way or another, it's only going to be up to you. And if you are willing to do the work necessary to be a special contributor in the work you want to do, there will be a space for you. Right? Talk to people who, lawyers, right? Everyone say, oh, law is terrible, right? Although, any law school, and it's true if you do look up the statistics, some large percentage of every graduating class in law school, they're not going to get jobs as lawyers. So that means law is a bad field? Well, it depends if you really want to be a lawyer. If you really, really want to be a lawyer, and you're really willing to do the work, it happens to be a very good field. There's plenty of people making a nice living at it. There's plenty of people who really don't want to do the work. They don't want to do the things that are necessary to build expertise and a practice and a connection to people, right? And so you know what? They're going to have, their insurance agent card will say JD at the end. Yeah. Right? Because it wasn't their thing, right? So, again, never ask, is it a good field for me? That's a personal question. And never ask, do you think it's going to be a good field to go into? Because no one knows the future. And there's room, in every job, there's room for somebody who's really committed and willing to do good work to be there. And there aren't any fields that have been closed out. Okay, maybe vinyl car seat upholstery. You're not old enough for that. When I was quite a bit younger than you, people who had fancy cars, you probably still, like the Hungarians used to have the clear plastic on the living room couch, so they used to do that in cars. It was hot, and it was uncomfortable, and it would crack in the sun, in the winter when it was cold. It was terrible, but kept it clean. Everybody had their car clean. I don't think too many people are doing vinyl upholstery anymore. But aside from that, there are people doing stuff, and the truth is that things can be cyclical. I just saw, and this is an example. It happens all the time. One of the From magazines that my kids brought home for Pesach, there was an ad for an artist's, it was a Kiddush Becher, right? But this is not the regular Kiddush Bechers. This is the artist line of Kiddush Bechers, right? With gold plate, and it's this and it's that. I'm sure it costs a bloody fortune, right? Think about what that's saying. It means that the regular stuff, like the silver that you buy for, regular stuff, has become commoditized. It's being made by Mexicans in a little factory in Guadalajara somewhere, right? So where's the contribution of someone who's really got talent? You go upscale, right? I'm sure when he decided to go into learning the art of being a silversmith, his parents were ready to kill him. Nobody's making money, right? A bunch of Mexicans, you can't make a living like that anymore. Yes, you can, by finding a market for someone who cares, right? There's someone out there who will really find that his artistry is worth paying for, right? It's always a way to stand out from the crowd and do something that's special for the person who's willing to hire you and pay you for it, right? But you got to find that customer, and you got to be able to show him why you're the person who's worth spending his money on, right? Okay. So you're going to speak to people. That's really where there's a tremendous breakdown. People do not talk to enough people about their job hunt. They don't get enough information. That has two very, very negative results. Number one, you don't know enough about the job in order to be articulate and engaging when you actually get the interview, because you haven't talked to enough people. You don't know enough about it. That's particularly an issue for us, okay, bottom line, because we spent our time in yeshiva, right? We did not spend our time doing all that other stuff. That's fine. It's a wonderful choice, believe me. Don't change that, right? But when it's time to look for a job, you have to overcome that by doing an extra effort to learn more about the job, okay? That's number one. And I think it's worth also telling the truth, especially in our world, in the frum world. There is a certain amount of cynicism. You'll run into it, right? That the guy who's got the job, has the business, right, is looking at you and is like, here, I should give you a job. Have you worked as hard as I have, right? Are you willing to be, I know, there is a certain amount of cynicism. It's not good, but it's there. Let's be honest. You'll run into it. Overcome it by showing enthusiasm, commitment, and creativity. So do the talking. Talk to people. Get out there. There's another tremendous advantage to it, and that is simply you want to be in the top of the mind of the guy who next Shabbos morning is at a kiddush when his friend says to him, my bookkeeper just quit. What am I going to do? I just met a guy. And he was really on the ball. Okay, send him in Monday morning. Tons of jobs happen that way. How are you going to make sure you're the one he thinks of when he hears that over the piece of kishke at the kiddush? Right? Answer is, because you went and talked to him, and you came across as enthusiastic and interested and willing to learn, and all those other good things. Right? And that's why he has the confidence that when that happens, and it does, right? He'll say, oh, I'll get you his number after Shabbos. Right? So talking to people has a fantastic good impact. Okay? Once you've done that, and of course because of that you're going to go home and redo your resume and make sure it really demonstrates those points. And you have to, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow night, but you really have to make sure that that message gets across. Don't let the following happen. It did. This is a true story. I was once at kind of like a conference. People were coming for job search and all this other kind of stuff. A fellow walks up to me, and he says, would you mind taking a look at my resume? I said, okay. So I take the resume, and this is how I always do it. I took the resume, and I didn't read it. I haven't seen a word. And I said, can you tell me the absolute best reason why someone should hire you to do the work you want to do? So this fellow actually was an X-ray tech. So he said, I'm really, really good with the new kind of machine that's come out that's really, it's very popular. Not everyone knows how to do it, and I'm really good with it. I get excellent results, and I'm able to make sure that the patients stay calm and that it's not a difficult experience. Sounds good. Could you please show me where it says that on your resume? He started shaking. He was almost crying. He said, I spent $2,000 on that resume. And what you just showed me is it doesn't say the message I need to get across. It's not there. It's got, I was this and I was that and I worked here and I worked there, but the reason I should hire you is not there. Okay? That's a tragedy. Yeah.
Could you substitute that on the cover letter?
Absolutely. It should be everywhere. Right? Repetition is a wonderful thing. Right? Okay, you have to come up with a slightly different way of saying it, but you're going to make sure it's always there, because that's your selling point. That's why me. Right? Remember, you're not looking for a job to do advertising for everybody else who's also looking for a job. Everyone who went to my school has this degree and they have worked in that company, so I should just pick one? No, me. I'm the one I want to get a job, right? Right? So that's special. What makes you special? Right? So you want it to show everywhere. right? It should be everywhere. You don't want any message to get across without making that point because you don't know where he's going to be paying attention, right? That's the nature of people, right? Some guy's going to see, like, the resume is what I look at. Another guy likes cover letters. Another guy is really only listening to the elevator pitch. Doesn't like to read things. You don't know. Make sure it all says it, right? You want complete coverage, saturation. Never let that message not get out. Yeah?
Yeah, but I have a question on the resume part. Like, you a resume, you don't write sentences about, it's like your skills, where you work, and so how do you come up?
Okay, so you don't. You're right. It tends to be in like, short phrases. But you can talk about, especially using verbs and numbers, right? Use such and such a machine to produce more accurate, results that, with 10% reduction in need for, repetition of the X-ray, for example, right? Numbers, 10% reduction. That's a huge savings, right? If I have to do 10% less do-overs, right? Saves me money, saves me time. Okay, you can put that in, right? You want to make sure you put it in, because that differentiates you from everybody else who knows how to run the machine, right? And that's your selling point, right? For that matter, with 10% fewer complaints about pain after having to sit in the X-ray machine, right? That's also extremely valuable. You know how much time it takes to sit and tell you, yes, madam, I know, but sometimes the machine can be difficult, but you're going to feel better tomorrow. I don't want to have to bother with that. If you can make that phone ring less often because you can make them sit in such a way they don't hurt, it doesn't, when they leave, right? Then you're fantastic. But make sure it says it, right? Everywhere, right? Everywhere. Resume, cover letter, everything. Right? I'm, a little sign over your head if you can, right? So all of your messaging has to bring that point across, that I have something special to deliver to you. Okay? In this day and age, there's no excuse, especially if you're working within the firm world, which is very small. There's no excuse for not knowing a lot about the company you're approaching, because information is very easy to get, right? And in the same way that I'm sure none of you would feel bad, I didn't, if you got a bit of a leg up because the potential employer feels more comfortable hiring someone who's from, and he feels like he's an honest guy, he's an erlich guy. If that gave you an advantage, you'll take the advantage. I think so. Right? In the same way, show that by showing that, and you're also part of my world, and I'm going to care about you too. Right? Meaning I'm going to learn about your company, and I'm going to learn about your products, right? And how long you've been working, and how you built this up from nothing, and you really put your heart and soul into it, and I respect that, and you want him to think that way about you, don't you? Right? So do it for him. Right? Because today information is very, very, very available, and almost nobody takes advantage of it. Right? You can learn anything. Ask somebody, did you Google it? No. Right? Did you ask anybody? No. Did you read a book about it? No. Guy called me today. I don't get these calls all the time. It's just because I was very, very busy at work. Therefore, all of a sudden, my phone starts ringing. Of course, it's going to work that way. Guy called me today. He wants to talk about career choice. And it turns out that he had really gotten a start in sales, and sales was going pretty well, but he also was doing some management and some this and some that. So I asked, I don't want to have to bring this guy in and spend an hour with him. If we can do this quickly, then it's best. So I just asked him, I said, but when you're doing your sales work, how do you feel about it? He said, I really love it. Good. So I said, and your success rate is appropriate for your experience and your background? He says, the boss is happy. I said, good. Let me ask you one more question. Tell me the title of the last book you read about sales. He said, I can tell you 4. I said, you're a salesman. Okay. I said, stop everything else. Don't be, get out of management, get out of everything else. Give all of your kaiches to sales. You are a salesman. Right? It really works that way. Right? And when he'll talk to people, and when he'll apply for a job, and he starts quoting Zig Ziglar, who's a famous guru of sales, right, or whatever other book, that's going to communicate, hey, I'm in this world, I'm a pro, and you're looking for a pro, I'm your guy. right? I speak the language, I'm into it, I'm willing to give my time to it, I'm willing to really, really take it seriously. All right? That's what the employer wants to hear. Okay? You've been extremely patient and asked good questions. I hope I've asked and answered some of yours. If there's anything you'd like to talk about afterwards, I'd be more than happy to stay. If there's any question that you'd like to bring up, please, by all means. And thank you. And hatzlacha. Okay? Yep. Okay. See, and now, since he wasn't here at the beginning, thank you, Rabbi Wordy, for this wonderful opportunity. You know, this is a wonderful person. He's really, I'm very, very excited at the fact that I have privileged to know him. And this is a fabulous opportunity, a fabulous project, and it should get benched with tremendous hatzlacha.
Amen. Thank you. And I'm sorry I wasn't here to introduce you.
No, I had a more than adequate introduction. Hopefully by now they don't need one anymore. I mean, if you still need to sell me, then I'm in trouble.
So, quick thing. Tomorrow night is the resume workshop. By raise of hands, how many of you have a resume already? And how many of you don't have a resume at all?
Okay, so about half an hour, like
Okay,
you're looking for.
so that's the way we're gonna break up. I'm gonna email you. I don't know the difference. I'm just gonna send a basic template for those of you who don't have it. Tomorrow, I'm giving you homework to do. Tomorrow, try to fill out at least a little bit. We're gonna split up into two groups. Mordechai's gonna be here, and yours gonna be here. And one group will do the ones that are just getting to work on the resumes. We'll work together to get it up to par. And the guys that already have resumes will work in another group to upgrade it. And also, we'll talk about LinkedIn. Very important. Your resume nowadays, LinkedIn is almost like a resume. People actually, when you apply for something, they right away Google you, and they look for you on LinkedIn, and you want to make yourself look good on LinkedIn. And, so your resume has some carryover to LinkedIn. They sort of work together nowadays. So that'll be discussed tomorrow night as well. I don't know if I'm going to physically be here tomorrow night. I'm not sure. I'm not it's up in the air. But fine. So just look out for my email. I'm going to send it actually right now. It's just basic. For those who don't have it, it's basic info. Tomorrow night you'll play with that basic info to update it and upgrade it. Mr. Shem, and your questions for me or for Mordechai?
We were just saying that that is supposed to be directed.
Oh, you have to have a basic one ready, and then when you find out the thing, you add things, minus things, but you have to have a certain basic thing.
You want to have a bank of stuff, so we'll talk about how to do that. And I'm hoping to actually, you'll say it to me, and we'll say, okay, did that grab me? How can we change it to it does? Right? So we really get the sense of how to create one of those bullet points that communicates rather than just sitting there and right. So we're going to we're actually going to practice that, because that's what we want. Remember, resumes have 6 seconds. That's the research. Resumes are accepted or rejected in 6 seconds. You've got to make it hit. So we're going to practice that and see how can you say anything, whatever you're going to put on it. How can we say it in a way that it grabs? That's what we want. Okay, that's what we want to practice tomorrow night. Once you get the idea of how to do that, you'll be able to do it with any fact that you want to add to the resume. Right, but that learning how to make that hit is extremely valuable. Yes, sir.
What do you do if you don't know what field you want to go?
Okay, so basically, the exact same process, but start the iteration a stage earlier.
What's that? You
Yes.
answer anyway, but you weren't here Monday night, right? Were you here Monday night? No?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you weren't here Monday night? You weren't.
Okay.
We spoke about this Monday night.
Okay, so there you go. Rabbi Wordy's got a link for you. There you go. He's always got what you need.
Make your resume before the
I'm sorry?
It's online?
went to the class. You haven't done the class yet.
Right.
How do you make your resume?
Okay, so we'll have a group tomorrow night that's really starting at 0, and we'll talk about reaching back into your past lives and finding things that actually do have experiences that you can bring forward, right? Because unfortunately, there are some people who are just blank. We hope you're not one of them. But most people have done stuff. You just don't realize it, right? There are things you've been involved with in many settings, right? And hopefully we'll be able to find them. And that will help you create a basis on which to build. Okay? And in terms of, so what color is your parachute is very, very good, even if you're starting out completely. It really is kind of a self-examination, finding things and giving you a chance to it's almost like mussery, right? We do mussery around here, right? In kind of like examining yourself and what's really been meaningful to you, what's really gotten your attention, what's made you feel like it's something that I'm committed to, I'd really be interested in, and using that as a way to narrow it down. So that's really valuable. And ultimately, the next step, of course, is talking to people that you see as being somewhat similar to you. You probably know people who have somewhat similar backgrounds. Talk to them about, again, never ask them for a job, but ask them, what has worked for you? Where are you? What kinds of things have you experienced, right? And why is it work or not work? That's something that's a very valuable conversation. And then for some people, where that also isn't working, I call it the deep end method, which basically is just try something, right? Jump into the deep end. And essentially, it's not a job, it's really school. It just happens that they may be paying you something for it. But you're not there because you want to do this work, you're really there to explore. In other words, you get a job in a warehouse, right? It could be almost anything, and it's probably not going to be very sophisticated, right? You take a job as like with one of these group homes, right? They hire people without a lot of experience, but it gives you a whole window into the world of psychology and social services. You take a job in a warehouse. It's not a great job, right? But it's a window into the whole world of logistics and supply chain and all these other things. It's what you're really doing is going there to learn. It happens they pay you a little bit, right? So it's a little bit cheaper than going to school, but it's really a school. And what you're there to do is to have your big eyes wide open. And so what is he doing? What is that job? What is that? How did that get here? Where did this come from? What is he doing? How does that, and why, does he like it? He looks like he's having a really good time. Why is that? What is he doing that's so meaningful to him? That's your chance. I call it the deep end method, and it can work very well. Right? There's some people, the nature of the way they learn is it doesn't happen until they experience it. Right? So for them, sometimes the deep end method is really the best way to go, right? But again, it's not that you're taking a crummy job. You're going to school. It happens to be in the guise of a job, right? But that's what you're there for, right? Does that help a little? Other question?
How important is your references?
So overwhelmingly, especially if you're working within the firm community, your references are virtually meaningless because everybody knows everything about you no matter what, right? And no one's going to bother calling the people that you wrote down because why would I do that? Right? I can find 10 other people who can tell me far more. Certainly only if there's going to be something negative, right? As if you really, really mess somebody up, this is not going to be good because that's going to come out, right?
Not specifically in the firm community.
Right, but in general, references are far less now than they used to be, right? The only really valuable references are professional. Personal references are meaningless because everybody can find out all they want to find out about you without asking anybody, without asking you, right? Plenty.
A previous employer, how?
So you want that's a professional reference, and that's really a question of just your skills, right? That's when someone contacts a previous employer, they're really going to be asking specifically about skills, and that, of course, that's going to be important. Hopefully, you did use your skills very, very well.
These days, you don't really need to include it. They see where you work.
Yeah, exactly.